This is the first one I ever made. I went to Catholic grammar school and high school, knew nothing about art, ended up, because of a Christian brother, going to the Art Institute of Chicago. This is from my first sculpture class. And I found some copper tubing in the garbage and cut it up and welded together St. George and the Dragon, because I went to St. George High School. So St. George is fighting the dragon. This is the second piece I ever made. It's a horse, of course, but it's made of welded steel. A man gave me a sheet of steel. I taught myself how to weld, and I made this horse. Here's a picture of me in a one-car garage that I worked in for a long time, making welded pieces. I had a patron that wanted to buy this for years, and I wouldn't sell it to him, so eventually I kept the welded piece, and I cast 3 more in bronze, and I gave him one of the bronzes as a gift. So, taking this sheet of steel in different forms, I would cut pieces and then seam weld everything and grind it. This one is natural rust. After I welded it, it went to rust. I found it out in my yard, and I love the color of it. So I left it that way, and that's a finished piece. They're all from a series called Constructions. Then I moved into standing constructions, which are the big one over there, this one, and this one. This is a hubcap from an automobile that inspired this piece of sculpture. It's like something that's grown from the earth into a form, like a mushroom, and it forms a sculpture. I did a piece like this that won a major award at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it was a construction. And again, it's made of sheet steel, cut in forms, and then each line is welded. So when you come close, you can see the ripples of the melting steel. As we move down here, this piece again is another sheet steel, and it's another growing form. Then I got into using the same steel and making figures called Man in the Box. And you can see that my first sketch shows the man with bird wings bound to the wheel. The wheel was back when we had the gas crisis, everyone realized how much we depended on the wheel. So I have a man very tortured and dependent on that wheel. So these men are all growing from the axle or the stem, and the man in the box on top is in a box, but his wings are cut off at the plane of the box. Nothing survives outside of that box, and it's called selfishness. And these are all, they go from aircraft wings to real bird wings to, I had to finish the series, so I decided to make the man, I'd crucify him on his wings. And that's right here. This is the farthest thing from aerodynamics. They're cubes, they're blocks. There's no aerodynamics here. And he's crucified on his wings. This one is half plant, half man, and it shows the great dependency of one to the other. Okay, from this, I moved on to machines. So I started making flying go-nowhere machines. This has 4 wheels. The wheels go in a circle. It has wings that flap so it can fly. It has rudders that steer it. But let's think, it doesn't fly. The wheels go in a circle. So no matter how hard it tries to get anywhere, it stays right here and goes in a circle. Again, the wings make it fly. These are rudders that steer it, and these are devices that tell it where it's been and where it's going. But it never goes anywhere. It's a flying, go nowhere machine. This is Daddy Longlegs. It's like the Daddy Longlegs spiders. I made this for my son Christopher so he could pull something in the 4th of July parade. And Sue, my wife, put flags and banners and all kinds of things on it, and he was quite a hit in the parade. Then from the flying go-nowheres, I got into little mechanical, some of these are 12 feet high. This one's called the Sparrow because it's a little flying machine, like a sparrow is a little bird. This is a circus wagon. And this has brass wheels. They're battery operated. And again, I've made some of these pretty tall. And they're all mechanical. Now, I love movement, so I started making things that were balanced. So this piece is just balanced. That's why it moves. It's heavier down here than it is up there. And it's on wheels. I've made thousands of wheels. Whenever I didn't know what to do, I'm not inspired, I would just make wheels for days, pile them up. And then eventually I would find a way to use them. Okay, as we move along here, I go into another phase, and I used to do a lot of commissions for shopping centers and buildings. I was asked to do a piece for a shopping center in White Plains, New York. This is the model of my proposal. The piece is 68 feet high. And I made a print of the top man pretty close to the size of the real sculpture in the shopping center. So when you see this, you see that. The ball, it's a little bigger than that actually. The balls are about this big. And when you come over here, you can get little detailed photos of the piece going together in the shopping mall. So this is in the skylight on the 7th floor. Here we go and see it being unwrapped, and the scaffolding is 80 feet up. And you see men up on top of the scaffolding lifting the figures up to put them up in the shopping mall. Canada, called Cadillac Fairview. They said, we understand you do sculptures for buildings and things. And I said, of course. And they said, we'd like you to do a sculpture in our new shopping center in New York. And it has to be quite tall, like 68, 69, 70 feet. And I said, no problem. So I made this model. They loved it. And they said, you have 6 months to do it. Can you do it? And I said, no problem. So I stalled for 3 months because I couldn't get myself motivated to start it. And one day I got a telephone call from the company in Canada, And they said, how are you doing on our sculpture? Now, they had already paid me half the money. And I said, it's coming along just beautifully. I can't wait for you to see it. And they said, wonderful, because we're flying down next week. And I said, that's great. I can't wait to see you. Now think about this. I hadn't done a thing. So about a week later, a limo pulled up in front of my studio, and 4 people got out, and they walked up the walk, and they came in. I don't know how I did it, but this figure was standing there, 15 feet high, in the middle of my studio. And they said, wonderful, you are working on it. And I said, yes, and it'll be in New York in 3 more months. And it was. And these are shots of it going together in my studio, being installed. I couldn't get a crane in the building. I had to build scaffolding 80 feet high. And it was built like a model airplane with structural tubing, and then we skinned it in sheet bronze. I had 2 wonderful sculptor friends, Ed Johnson and Dan Blue, and they were the guys that helped me weld it together. Taking the balance machines, and I put them in a circle, or I put them on a wall. These are called flower machines, because they reminded me of a flower. These are all flower machines. Here's the way I work when I get a commission for a shopping center. This piece is 30 feet high. It's welded aluminum and steel. And here's a little man to kind of give you the idea of how big it is. It was in the shopping center for about 15 years, and they decided they didn't want it anymore. They were going to redo the mall. So they asked me if I wanted it back. And I said, of course I want it back. So I got it back, and I sold it 2 days later to a collector, and it's now in Bannockburn, Illinois, in his backyard. Here's a picture of it in the actual shopping mall. That was Lincoln Mall in Illinois. This is a piece in Peoria, Illinois. And here's another piece of it in the mall. And these pieces would balance, and this one moved with a motor, and it triggered all the pieces, so it would keep going up and down in the mall. Some of my shows were the circus show, and I like to think of different ways of seeing a circus wagon. I love the circus. This is part of a circus wagon. That's Circus City. That was in the lobby of the Standard Oil building for about 10 to 12 years. It's about 9 feet high. There are 5 towers. They each move independently, and they're lit from the base with neon light. So it looked like a city at night that was moving all the time. Here's one from a show I did called The Circus Show. And she's a performer. And I made things like Elephant Lady, high wire acts in the gallery where the figure on a unicycle would roll back and forth in the gallery. I made Stilt Man, and here's one of my unicyclists. He's on his unicycle. He's got his umbrella to balance him because high wire people need something to help them balance. And he's juggling balls. I made a lot of these. This one is in Atlanta, Georgia. He's life-size, and you see a picture of him in the mall, and this is a picture of him in my studio. This one is from this is called Streamliner, and it's actually on loan from the Arlington Heights Library. It was a gift to the library from one of my patrons. Here's another one of my circus wagons. And that again is the piece in the standard oil. These are all battery operated, and the colors are painted enamel. This piece was in the Borg Warner lobby at Michigan and Adams, right across from the Art Institute. It was about, you can see me right here. So it was about 11 or 12 feet high. When they redid the lobby after 15 years, they donated it to the YWCA in Hyde Park. And I have no idea what happened to it. This one is in the Wrigley Building front window. It was there about 20 years. I don't think it's there anymore. That's what happens to my pieces. So a lot of them just seem to disappear. Another phase, and it's laser engraved mylar foil. I started doing a lot of these, and the mylar has 100,000 grooves per inch that's been engraved with a laser. You don't see the grooves, but each groove is a prism, so the light created makes the rainbow colors. So when you move from here, look at it that way, you'll see triangles. As you move past the front of it, the triangles disappear. And as you go along, it starts to go into horizontal lines. And then it changes into ovals. And I've made these quite large in bank lobbies and in building lobbies around the Chicago area. When I made this, I was commissioned by one of my patrons to do these. I had to make 100 of these for Medline Industries. And I agreed to doing it as long as I could do each one different. I didn't want to mass produce 100 pieces. So they gave those out as Christmas gifts to their best customers. Medline is one of the world's largest hospital supply companies. Here's some photos of some of the pieces being made. This one's 28 feet high in front of the Wellness Center in Arlington Heights at the hospital. It's welded aluminum. And here you can see a crane putting it up. And here it is in the studio being built out of aluminum. Then it was painted with Duranautics, which is an aircraft paint that they paint airplanes with. And it's been up about, 10 years. This is one of my man in the box, and he's life-size. And I did this for Medline Industries. It was shown at the International Medical Supply Show in Chicago. This is a piece I was commissioned, actually first commission I ever had, to do for McDonald's for Hamburger University. It was in Elk Grove. It's where they taught people how to cook and how to be owners of franchises of McDonald's. And they invited me to do a piece, and they wanted it to represent McDonald's. So the first thought I had was the happy family on their way to McDonald's. And they loved the idea, but I don't think they realized that I was going to make my kind of figure with long necks, very, very different, almost like aliens that had come to the earth to go to McDonald's. And here I am kind of putting one together. And this was in front of their building for about 2 years, and it got stolen one night. And it took them years. They could never find it. And I was giving a lecture at a high school, and a timid little man came up to me and he said, I know what happened to that McDonald's sculpture. And he said, I worked in a smelting company in Chicago, and it came in chained to the back of a tow truck. And the owners of the company said, get that out in the furnace and melt it down. So they melted this 800 pounds of silicone bronze down. They gave the two fellows that brought it in on the tow truck $200. It took McDonald's 5 years to convince me to make another one. I would never make another one this big. This was about 9 feet. So I got very ill working on this. I got what's called quick fever from welding bronze. And so I said, I just can't do it. And they finally convinced me. So I made it half size, and it's now in Hamburger University again, which was in Oak Brook, and now it's down at Oprah's studios in Chicago. When they came to work, it was weird because they called me up and said, you know, your sculpture's gone, but they left all the feet. They couldn't get the mounting bolts out, so they just cut all the ankles, left the feet, and took the rest. Here's a piece that's, I do memorials once in a while, and this was a memorial for a young man who was killed in a car accident, and he loved hockey. He played hockey. So I did a bronze on a piece of thick plexiglass that I sanded with a grinder so it looked just like ice. There's the blue line, here's a puck, and these are all etched into granite portraits of the young man growing up. It's in front of the Northbrook hockey rink. Then we come over here, and here's another memorial to a young man who was killed by a train in Lake Forest, and he was a catcher on a Little League team. So I made him life-size, and they made a beautiful new stadium in Lake Forest, and he highlights the center seating area of the stadium. Some of my clocks. This one's 28 feet high in Arlington Heights, Rosemont 30 feet high, Elmhurst 20 feet high, Schiller Park. Here's some, this is most interesting, one of my first commissions for an award. A man called me and he said, we need a bronze chicken. And I said, I don't make bronze chickens. And he said, well, this is for Colonel Sanders. It's the Restaurateur Award of the Year, and we were told you could do it. And I said, oh, that sounds challenging. And they said, we only have $350. I said, well, you know, I don't work for $350, but I like the idea, so I think I'll do it. So I said, but I'm not gonna, he wanted a Chinese chicken. I said, I'm not gonna do a Chinese chicken. For the colonel, I'm going to make a chicken. His head will turn back and forth, his wings will flap, his tail will move, and he'll lay a golden egg for the colonel. The guy hung up the phone, and I figured, well, I guess I didn't get that job. And 2 days later, he couldn't find anybody, apparently, so he called me back and he says, I'm going to give you a chance. You can make that chicken. But you only have a week. I said, oh, I can do it in a week. So I did. And a year later, I got a call from the National Restaurant Association direct. They didn't go through this agent. And they said, we want you to do a piece for Ray Kroc of McDonald's. And I said, you know, you don't have enough money for me to do an award. And they said, wait a minute. We gave you $3,500 last year for the chicken. Wasn't that enough? I said, no, I got $350. So agents sometimes make a lot more than the artist. Here's a piece in Springfield, Illinois, in the medical building there. And I think that, oh, here's a piece I carved in 3-inch thick plexiglass for the Arab American Business Association. And they give these every year to the top leaders in the country in industry and religion. It's made with carving inside of 2 pieces of plexiglass. And then there's green, which is the Arab color. Oh, the first one I did for them, they called me up and said, "We understand you do awards." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, we need a very special award for Muhammad Ali." And I said, "Oh, I'd love to do that." And they said, "Well, we don't have a lot of money." And I said, "I don't care, I want to do it." So I did it, and they presented it to him in front of 1,800 people at the Hyatt Hotel in Chicago, and they insisted that I go on stage with him and present it to him. So I did, and I had to be up there with Muhammad Ali, and we became friends. And I heard that he just loved my award. And after that, every year, the Arab American Business Association calls me to do 2 or 3 or 4 different awards for them. So I'm trying to retire, but I'm having a hard time with it. Working on the constructions, again with the sheet steel, I just get these whimsical things in my head. I don't know where they come from, but this is the dancer. It's the farthest thing from grace. It's just a clunky piece of coal, I think. But I wanted it to look like it was a dancer. These are cathedrals. I've always been inspired by these little towns in the middle of nowhere, like Wisconsin or Europe somewhere. And out of all these little houses and slums, there would always be a giant cathedral that took 200 years to build. And these are my cathedrals. They're very symbolic because they have 3 things on top. That's the 3 that's so important in religion. So I did a number of these. I do these in sheet wax, and I weld the sheet wax together with a hot iron instead of welding steel. Then they go to a foundry and they burn out the wax and they pour bronze, and this is what I get. This is one of the early pieces called the Lovers, again from a sheet of steel, cut, welded, ground off, lots of work on this piece. And it's a man and woman, and they form a heart. These are medallions that I did for a long time, commemorating different events. Batman the movie, Chicago Cubs, Wrigley Field, Arlington International Race Course, McDonald's 35th anniversary, Ray and Joey Myers at DePaul, City of Hope, USO, Medina Country Club, Arlington Heights new train station, City of Chicago, all different medallions. I did a clock in the middle of Arlington Heights for the Daily Herald, and this commemorated the clock. They're done in cast pewter. This is an interesting story. When I did this one, Jack Nicholson wouldn't sign off on it. He was the Joker, and Keaton was Batman. He said, "I'm not going to be smaller than Keaton." So I had to reverse these and make Keaton small and Jack Nicholson big, which meant I had to eliminate Gotham City Tower and the Joker's face. And by that time the movie came out, and by the time he signed off on it, the movie was already gone. And instead of selling 200,000 medallions, I think we sold 20,000. A disaster. These constructions, I found these two cylinders, and it led to this whole thing. And again, it's from a sheet of bronze. I cut it with a shear, and I weld each piece together and grind it, and then I blew it with a torch and oil, the way you blew a gun. So that's where this unique color comes from. This was 1967, very early. Here's a piece inspired by Studs Terkel, who had a radio show on WFMT radio in Chicago. I listened to Studs religiously every day when I worked. And he had a program called Overkill and Mega Love. And it was about the atomic bomb. And this is a period when everybody built bomb shelters. And they were going to the earth, to these bomb shelters, and putting food and water so they could survive the bomb. And I was so moved by that program on the radio that I made this man after the disaster, the bomb. When everyone went to hide in the earth, they eventually came back to life, and they grew from the earth like a plant. So this is the way I saw man after the bomb. But guess what? He's still wearing a helmet of war. And my statement here was, no matter what we do, man will always have war. And I gave this to Studs as a gift because he inspired it. So just before he died, he called me and said, I want you to have that back. And that's why I have it back. But he became a good friend of mine. We all know Sharpie pens. They're made by Sanford Company. So I started doing drawings called Larger Than Life. And these are all done with a Sharpie pen. Now you know you cannot erase a Sharpie pen. So these are all scribbles. When you come up close to them, like Luciano Pavarotti, you see that they're just scribbles. They don't make sense. But as you move away, the scribbles go together. And I had a critic call me because he came when I had a show of these. And he said, you told me they were drawings. When I walked in, all I saw were large photographs. And I realized when you look at a photograph in the newspaper, if you look real close, they're all dots or scribbles. And that's what these are. So here you see Princess Di, Mick Jagger, Mother Teresa, and over there you see Salvador Dali and Picasso. And next to Picasso are other drawings that are all that size, but they're all gone now. They're in collections. That's Muhammad Ali, The Godfather, Sylvester Stallone. I actually made 4 of Michael Jordan. He has one in his home, and that was an exciting thing. I did 2 sculptures for Michael Jordan's home. Okay, as we move over here, I do a lot of commission work, and this one is the Hot Dog of the Year for Chicago Magazine. And along with doing the award, I was asked to review the hot dog restaurants. And we had to do 30 places in 2 days. And after the 3rd place, the editor of the magazine came over to me and he said, Joe, You don't have to eat the whole hot dog in every place we go. So that I was very relieved. But that's the award they gave out every year. And here's another award that I do. I've done this for 20 years, and this is the Lou Allen Trophy for the Air Force. And I was the president of the Air Force Art Group, and every 18 months we would turn over a piece of work to the Pentagon at a black tie dinner at Andrews Air Force Base. So at this dinner I was at the head table with all generals, and General Lou Allen was sitting next to me. We got talking, and it was a wonderful night. He invited us to his home. I said, "General, where is your home?" He said, "It's the big one on base, right on the corner." So Sue and I went, and 2 weeks later I got a call from the Pentagon, and they said, "We understand you're doing the Lou Allen Trophy." And I said, "What?" And they said, "Yes, General Allen enjoyed your company, and he's retiring, and he wants you to do his trophy." So because of that, I had to make this about 7 feet high, and then I make replicas of it every year. I've done that for 20 years. This is another model for a piece at Ravinia Park, and it was commissioned, and here's the piece in the park. And that was a wonderful commission. Here we get into some of my bronzes, and these are inspired by smoke rising from a cigarette. So if you look at something with a stream of smoke and you blink, you will see an image. So I would look at the smoke and blink, and when I saw something I really liked, I'd freeze it in my mind, and then I would cut it out of wood, and then I would cast it in bronze from the wood carving. This is a piece we could call The Lovers. It's 2 pieces together, a man and a woman. These are all 2, they're winged flight figures. And what I'm saying is it takes 2 to fly. They each have 1 wing. So they have to hold together to fly. And I was then commissioned to do a piece in front of the Standard Oil building in Chicago. And over here you see a model of it. Well, it was about a 3-month process of trying to develop what we were going to put out in front of the building. And the curator came to my studio, and he saw this piece, but it was in pieces, 2 pieces laying on the floor. And he picked them up, and he said, "Look, let's put the pieces like this." And he reversed them and put them horizontal, and that ended up being 23 feet long in front of the building. That's how sometimes a piece of art comes about. And here's the actual piece in front of the building and the model of it. Sometimes I get on these crazy kicks, and I was looking at Da Vinci drawings, and I really enjoy ice cream and drawing ice cream cones and sundaes and banana splits. And so I decided to do a series called The Last Sunday. And these are Da Vinci drawings that I did from his drawings with chalk. And then I added my own banana splits, or ice cream sundaes, or ice cream cones to the Da Vinci drawings. And my wife said that is sacrilegious. And I said, that sounds fine. Now we have the radiating, lines from a saint. That's Da Vinci contemplating the ice cream sundae. These are pieces from life. So this was a model, a young man, and I did this, I used to go once a week to a clay class where we'd make things in clay. And this is a study of him. I did it in one night. And then I went to the foundry and I had molds made and cast in bronze. This again is a study from life. And a very interesting story. This piece I had in wax. Now I make it in clay, then I make a mold, then I cast the wax in the mold, then the wax goes to a bronze foundry, and the mold is made from that, and the wax is burnt out of the mold, and then bronze is poured into that. So it was in my hands, and I dropped it on the floor, and it broke in pieces, the wax. And I really like what happened when it broke. So I cast it in bronze, just the way it broke. And it's one of my favorite pieces now, because it's kind of abstract and it's realistic. Here's my next phase is Icarus, and Icarus is Greek mythology. He made his wings of wax and feathers, and his father, Daedalus, warned him not to fly too near the sun. But he ignored that, and of course he flew too near the sun. The wax melted, his wings collapsed, he fell to the sea and died. This is the sun and the moon made out of plexiglass. And I kind of like what's happening with Icarus with this. This one is silver and this is bronze. And now I've continued my Icarus studies. This was my first Icarus made when I was doing things with sheet steel. He's about 1964 I made him. I wanted to make him big. And I'm going to do an edition of this, but here, these were done in 2018. And they're done with clay, and then I make molds and cast them in bronze. And again, it's Icarus, fighting the wind, relaxing with his wings down. And I want to do one of these life-size, so that's my next challenge, to find a building to put it in front of. My first rocket machine that I did back when I first taught myself how to weld, and I had a 10-year retrospective show at the Museum of Science and Industry in 1977. And that's where I introduced my rocket machines and my flying machines and my circus wagons. This is a circus wagon. And actually did one of these for Ringling Brothers. Some of them actually played music. Now, from there I went into another whole series. When I got really depressed doing the man in the box, when I crucified him on his wings, I ended that and I started this. These are wonderful little fantasy people. They don't have arms, they have wings, so they can fly. Just imagine that. And this is called the dawn of flight. They're running along, and the first one just is taking off. These are welded bronze rod, and then silver plated, and then 24 karat gold plated. Over here we have the man and woman, butterfly people, and here we have the bathing ritual. The woman in the center is bathing, and they're all celebrating that by flying around her. I love winged people and flight. And that's another study that was done in clay in one night and then made into bronze. Here's another winged figure. One of my first flying machines. It's a flying go-nowhere machine. It's not battery operated, it's electric, but it's the first time I was able to make a wing that actually flapped like a bird wing. And again, the wheels go in a circle, so it'll never get anywhere. The wings flap, but it can't fly. It has rudders to steer it, but why steer it if it doesn't go anywhere? All these are sensing radar and sensing devices to tell it where it's been and where it's going. I've talked about this piece many times, and people wonder how it works. And I explain that these little balls, if you listen, you'll hear them cracking into each other. It's very subtle, but that creates enough energy to make this work. And people are just amazed. And then I tell them, well, if you look at the base, you'll see that there's a stem that's turning from a motor. That's what really makes it work.